Salam alaikum, good morning everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great privilege to be here today, so thank you to David, Allah and the organizers for inviting me here. So I'm Dr. Scott Nowson and I do AI. And what I mean by that is I've spent the last 26 years of my life studying, researching, and implementing AI solutions around the world. I've worked in research, in consultation, and I'm here today as PwC's AI lead for the Middle East region. I love talking about AI, and that's exactly what I'm going to do today. You've heard a lot about it already. So what I want to do is I always start with a bit of a level set. Let's talk about what AI is. And then I want to talk about why we at PwC believe AI is probably one of the most important technologies for the Middle East region. And it's one of the reasons that I actually came here 3 years ago. And then I want to move on to the topic of the day to lead into everything that you'll hear about, where we see AI play a role in next generation networks. So, what is AI? A lot of people still ask me that. We talk about it all the time, but AI is a lot of things. AI is an umbrella term. We talk about it in terms of human abilities, because that's really what artificial intelligence is, computers mimicking human abilities. We look at sensing. So this is where our brains make sense of the world, and computers can look at vision and images, can look at speech and text and language. And where we see this from what we just heard, we were talking just a few years ago about image processing. Now we're talking about video processing. We're talking about having cameras in every corner of the room streaming data, and it has to go somewhere. The computation has to happen somewhere. Once the data is made sense of, though, we start to think. And this is where we look at machine learning. This is where we look at decisions being made based on the data and based on the understanding that we have. And finally, acting, the autonomous vehicles or the autonomous networks, things where we start to interact with the real world. There are many different techniques in here, but AI covers quite a broad range. AI is also a little bit misunderstood. There's a lot of myths out there. So people equate AI and machine learning as being the same. Machine learning is just one part of a larger world of artificial intelligence. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning, a technique designed more like the human brain. AI learns by itself. We don't need any human intervention. There are techniques out there which do this, but AI needs a lot of data, a lot of labeled. What is good? If we want to predict something, what does good look like? And there's a lot of customization that needs to be done, so it can be quite complex. Most AI projects fail. That's something you'll hear. That's a big one. But it's true. Getting return on investment on AI and any innovative emerging technology is complex and takes real thought, passion, and belief to make it happen. But actually, when you look at the numbers, AI projects don't fail any more than any other kind of innovation or new technology project. So when people say, oh, don't adopt AI, it'll fail, don't believe it. It's a myth. And finally, AI is a journey. Today's AI, we hear Elon Musk and talk about artificial superintelligence and the danger therein of AGI and self-controlled robots and the Terminator. It's just not true. A lot of people are genuinely worried about it. I heard from my dentist that she was really worried about artificial general intelligence. And so I'll tell her what I told you. Which made no sense at the time, but it's just not true. A lot of AI is single capability, and it's really focused on task specifics, and you'll hear a lot about those today. So we at PwC give a lot of thought globally, and we are recognized as leaders by Forrester, by Gartner, by IDC in consulting for artificial intelligence. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what the trends and priorities for AI in the coming year will be. And I want to talk about two of these. First, to echo what David was saying in the opening, Investment in AI is on the rise. Following the pandemic, following the situation we're in, investment in digital transformation broadly is very much increasing. We've seen where we are in the world, but people are also seeing that artificial intelligence is a core component to that. So we are seeing a greater investment. Second, the way we phrase this, AI is your strategic ally. AI is important in the back office. And that's what we're saying here. Deploying it to key in-house functions. Another way of saying this is boring AI. Not the shiny, full frontal AI, but things like network optimization. Things that the consumer may never see. They don't need to know about, but it is the important things in the background that power everything. That back office, boring AI, you're going to hear a lot about this today. It is the most important and the most immediate way in which we are seeing return on investment today. Now, we believe it's incredibly important to the Middle East region. I came here because of the government's embrace of AI, because of the Minister for AI here in the UAE, setting out as the world's first, setting the digital agenda for the region. And in 2018, we produced a report which looked at what we believe to be the economic impact of AI for the region. And it is quite significant, $320 billion by 2030 on GDP for the region. And the largest in relative terms being here in the UAE. But we see that echoed also across many different industries. So we talked earlier about oil and gas, energy utilities, construction. We see probably the largest base number in terms there of almost 80 to 100 billion dollars in those industries similarly. So AI is critically important, and it's really important that we get it right, that we understand the way that we want to deploy this. And so one thing we see is that AI, you've heard about it, you're going to hear about it again. The reason it's so important in intelligent networks is, one, it's a ripe source of data. Machine-generated data is almost perfect and almost the right candidate for any sort of machine learning, for any sort of AI-based development. And we can see it in enterprise network automation, user experience, data center network management, O&M efficiency. And you can read this here, but there are corollaries in the way we use AI in the real world. So enterprise network automation, AI like RPA is a tool for automation. It is all about reducing manual errors, be that in configuring a system or setting up a network, embedding intelligence in networks that we have. Many years ago, while I was doing my master's, a friend of mine wrote a book about ants and how ants, the insect, behaved. And I got really interested in ant colony optimization, which was a theory based on ants applied to networks as a way of optimizing the routing of network traffic. And this is what we see today to the nth degree. Self-healing, Allah mentioned that. And these capabilities are what we'll see a seamless user experience. That is one of the most important ways of having AI. That back office that I mentioned, where we see AI making sure that the consumers never lose connectivity, no outages. You want Netflix, for example, to be able to recommend you the right products. There are millions of data points and millions of hours of algorithms going into that back, just so that you can have a suggestion without having to think about it. Data network management, we're looking at capacity planning, security policies. This is something we see in last mile delivery, in real network optimization. How do we move products? How does Amazon get products from the warehouse? How do they predict who is going to buy which product, where in the country? Distribution, logistics, anything we see in a networking space has a parallel in the real physical world. And if you watched any of the videos in the opening of this session, they were there, the transportation networks. Everything has a mirror in the real world, and particularly operation and maintenance efficiency. We talk a lot about predictive maintenance in the real world, and wiring up all your manufacturing devices with IoT so that we can measure them, so we can know when they're going to fail. We can predict when that's going to happen, and the same applies to networks. Governments looking at optimizing their internal campus network. Everything that we see in this space has that corollary in the real world. And why are increasingly intelligent networks so important? Well, we did a survey recently looking at digital trust and where the landscape is. We surveyed, I think, 3,500 CTOs, CIOs globally, and these were the responses from the Middle East. 81% of people see social engineering as a threat that will occur, very likely this year. 76% see a cyber attack on cloud services as very likely this year. So people are starting to increase their budgets. People are starting to look more deeply at cybersecurity. AI powers intelligent networks. Intelligent networks are going to be what powers this cyber resilience that we're going to need moving forward in our uncertain world. Thank you.